Now the scripture reading that comes from James chapter 2 verses 17 and 18. And the word of God says, "In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, 'You have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds.'" May God bless the reading of His word.
Amen. Thank you, Ellie. Faith and works, always together. Well, I want to start today by, we're thinking about work. Labor Day weekend. We read this, Ellie just read this beautiful scripture about how faith and work can always be together, should always be together. But I want you to think about maybe something that's not as appealing about work. I want you to think about what is the most boring job you ever had. What is the most boring job? Now, if you have trouble with that, if no one particular job jumps out at you, I want you to think about the job you have now and what the most boring part of your job is. I want you to be thinking about that. I'll tell you while you're thinking, I'll tell you about my most boring job. I was lucky to get it. It was a job, it was a good paying job. It was in a factory. I worked in a plastics factory over the summer, 1 year in college, and for 12 weeks, 15 weeks, something like that. I worked there in the plastics, and while I was there, they were doing one job. So there was just one thing for me to do. They were making these cases, thick plastic cases for American Airlines. I remember this so well because I looked at so many of these and worked on so many, and they were just the right size to fit in a 12-pack of Coke. So that's what they were for. Of course, American Airlines has lots of Cokes. They wanted these special plastic boxes, and my job was to take the boxes that had just come out, had been manufactured, just come out of the kiln thing where they were pressed, and then they would have these little extra pieces of plastic, and I would trim off that extra with a knife. Then I'd set it aside, and I'd grab the next one, I'd trim it off with a knife, and I'd grab the next one, I did that, and I did that 8 hours a day for 12 weeks, and it was, without a doubt, the most boring job I ever had. But I was grateful. I was lucky to have that job. And but I'll tell you, it's a problem with work. And, when I was 19, I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to get out of college and make sure I never have a job where I'm bored. I want to have a job where I'm never bored. That's my goal. Boy, that is a 19-year-old talking, because every job has its boring parts. Every job has its boring elements to it. And if we start, one thing we can do, especially if we don't know, we can start thinking, oh man, if I could just get this job, man, then that would not be boring at all. That would be an awesome job. I think, oh, well, what are some jobs that we think would never be boring? Oh, law enforcement, never boring. Man, that would be exciting. Nope. No. Lots of boredom there, lots of tedium there. Well, how about being a soldier? Being a soldier would be exciting. A soldier in combat, well, actually, they say soldiers will say 99% of the time you're bored, 1% of the time you're terrified. That's what it's like being a soldier. How about a doctor? A doctor would be great. It could just treat different people. New people would come in all the time. That would be exciting. That would be a good job. And then you talk to doctors and find out they do the same procedures over and over again. They see the same and treat the same kind of illness over and over again. They fill out the same paperwork over and over again, even with doctors. And so you say, okay, well, what could definitely be exciting? Oh, being a teacher. Being a teacher, tough, difficult job, but always got to be exciting because these kids, they're always changing, they're always growing. And then you talk to a teacher and they say, no, you've got great papers, you've got the lesson plans, and you've got to teach the same thing over and over. So even these jobs we think would not be boring, there are boring aspects to them. And we think, oh, well, that is such a problem, really. And then, the fact that so much of our work, everybody's work, has this big chunk that is boring. And I'll tell you, if yours doesn't, if your excitement all the way through, come and see me after church. I'd love to hear more about your exciting job that's never boring. No, work can be tough. Work can be boring. How do we deal with that? Well, a lot of people will say, that's just what has to be endured. That's the way they see work. Well, work is something we have to take, something we have to endure in order to get to the good part of, leisure. Being able to do what we want to do. We endure 8 or 9 or 10 hours of work so that we can have 3 or 4 or 5 hours of leisure before bed. We endure 5 days of work so that we can have the leisure of 2 days or 3 days, like this weekend, on the weekends. Or we endure, another way to look at it, we endure 40 years of work so that we can have the leisure of being retired. And so work is just something we have to endure. And I like the one guy who must have really thought this way, said that when kids get out of high school, what they do when they get out of high school is they spend time looking for the prison in which they're going to be serving the rest of their time during their life working. And boy, that's looking at work like it is just something you have to endure. But when it comes to the Bible, when it comes to the witness of what's written there, people throughout the Bible, from beginning to end, what we read about work is that work, in all its manifestations, from the time things we find interesting to the things we find boring, that is sacred. Work is sacred. Work is important. And you know what? According to the Bible, the most boring parts of our job, remember we were thinking about that? What's the most boring part of my job? What is that? That those parts of our jobs can actually be the most sacred. Those can be the times when we feel most closely connected to God. What we have to do, what we do is we look through the Bible and we look at the different people in the Bible and what they were doing when God talked to them. So God was wanting to speak to them. God was wanting to say something to them, usually that they could then carry to other people. What were these people doing when God chose to speak to them? Well, they were almost all working. And they were not doing the most exciting work. They were doing work that they had done for 7 or 14 or 20 years. And I tell you, it was work that could have been, by today's standards, we would have thought of as boring. Moses was a shepherd. He was just tending his sheep when he saw the burning bush and when God called out to him. Gideon was a farmer, and he was doing the dirty and tedious work of threshing out the wheat, getting it all separated so that, into the grain from the chaff. And that's what he was up to. David was a shepherd. He was taking care of the sheep. Saul was he was a rancher. He was taking care of his livestock when God called him. Andrew and Peter, they were fishing. They were busy fishing when Christ called to them. And James and John were busy doing something that, I don't know, sounds tedious to me. Sounds like the boring part of being a fisherman. They were mending their nets. Mending their nets, and that's when Jesus called upon them. Matthew was collecting taxes. None of these sound like the most exciting thing, and yet that is when God chose to call them. I tell you, there's an opportunity there. An opportunity for us today, because I think there are a lot of things that we do, and we can be retired, and this is the case because basically we all work. Kids work at their job of being kids, of playing and going to school and other things, and the retired folk, they work. Believe me, they work. They stay busy. Look at the retired folk in this church, and they're always doing something. They're always taking on some projects. And some of these things that we do, and some of the things we can't help but do, they're tedious. They're boring. But we can find God even in these moments when we say, again, maybe even especially in these moments. Maybe these are times, the boring parts of our job, when we can be in particular lookout for God in our lives. And here is how I think we do that. And part of this is from the Bible, part of it's from my own experience. Working at that plastic factory, I thought that was deadly dull. Oh, so boring. The people I worked with, they loved their job. They loved it. They like being able to talk to each other for a long time. They like to be able to they love that thing of getting into a rhythm and getting into, so that things were just kind of flowing and moving, and they got into that flow state really easily. And I think that's our choice. When it comes to the most boring parts of our job, and parts we find really tough to do, really tedious, is we can start seeing that, well, the first thing we can do, and this is what I tend to do, is to spend the whole time doing those tasks saying, I hate this, I want this to be over, I want this to be done, when is this going to be finished? When I get done with this, I can go on and do this, boy, I'm looking forward to doing this, I hate doing this. Spending the whole time focusing on how boring this is and how much I don't want to be doing. And you don't have to do that. I don't have to do that. One thing I can do if I choose to is to say, hey, this is an inevitable part of what I do. This is a necessary part of what I do. Because it's necessary to my job, it is important. And it is sacred. Let me tell you, God is involved in your work. You can't separate God off from your work. If your work is honorable, then God is a part of your work. And so these things you do, even the boring things, they are sacred. And if we start to see them that way, instead of sitting there disliking every moment we're doing them, we start seeing their sacredness, seeing their necessity, then we too can kind of get into that flow state. Can start getting things done, can start moving through these things we don't necessarily enjoy doing, but now we see the importance of. And boy, when we're in that flow state and things are moving, that is when we can feel close to God. That's when we can feel close to God. Things really start moving when we get into doing these different chores that we don't necessarily enjoy, but we see their necessity. And we see the potential for the sacredness that's in them. Then we can start feeling God. I also like the story of the guy who was a bus driver. He liked driving a bus. It was a city bus. But he liked it. He liked the driving part. He didn't like the stopping for passengers part. He did not like that part. Now, of course, it's an important part of being a bus driver. It's the stopping for the passengers part of the job is very important. He didn't like that. He thought it was boring. He thought it was tedious. Plus, the passengers could kind of be jerks. I mean, especially he noticed in the mornings. In the mornings, people seem to have no patience. They seem to be grumpy. And they treated him badly. They treated others badly on the bus. And he thought, well, you know what? I got the power here. I'm a bus driver. I could skip their stuff. If they treat me bad, I'll just keep going. And when I see them, because I see the same people every day, I can get back at them. I got the power to do that. And he thought, no. I'm going to do something different. He said, I'm going to preemptively be nice to them. Even though I know they're going to be bad to me, I'm going to be nice to them. So he started doing this every morning, being nice to everybody who came on, making it a point to try to brighten up their day just a little bit. You know what? For some of these people, it just took one day of doing that. One time of trying to being nice and giving them a good word in the morning and being patient when they were grumpy. One time, and that turned them around. That improved their mood for the rest of that bus ride, and really, as he would find out, for the rest of their day. That moment, that little transaction would touch their lives, would change them, would have an effect upon them. For some people, it took more than a day. Some people he had to pick up for months at a time, but after months and months of him being intentionally kind and compassionate and patient with this person, he began seeing this change in them as well. And people would start saying, man, you know what? You make a real difference in my life. After a year or two of seeing you and you greeting me every day, I'll tell you, you made a difference. And you've made a difference during some really pivotal moments in my life. When you didn't know this was going on in my life, but since you were kind to me every day, it gave me that encouragement I needed at just that moment. You see, here's this part of the job that he had found, this bus driver found tedious, but he turned it into something else. He made it into something that he recognized. First of all, he didn't make it sacred. He recognized that it was already sacred, and he started treating it that way. And that began to have an effect on his life, began to have an effect on his passenger's life. Listen, I want you to think about this. I want you to think about your work, whether you're busy going to a job 5 days a week or more, or whether you are retired or whether you are a student. If you've got things you have to do each and every day, I want you to think about the parts that you dread, especially the boring parts, the parts that come in every job. And I want you to be particularly attuned to the necessity of those boring parts. That's why you do them, because they are necessary. Because they are necessary, they are sacred. They're sacred. And they're a real opportunity then for you to be able to be and to listen and to reach out in those moments for God. And to feel God in those moments, even in the most boring parts of your job. That is your opportunity, really a unique opportunity to connect with God. And when you do that, then you will know that whatever your job is, whether it's a student, whether you work 5 days a week, whether you're retired, the work you do, you will know that the work you do, that the way you spend your time, and even the boring times, you will know that that is sacred. Let's bow. Loving God, we do give thanks that you give us so many opportunities to find you and to feel you in our lives. And Lord, there's sometimes some chances that we just overlook. We think you cannot possibly be in this particular moment. Lord, open our eyes and help us to see that you are there in every moment. Help us to see the opportunities we have to feel connected to you and to be reminded of the importance of what we do each day. Not just the faith that we have, but how that faith is moved into action. Loving God, all these things we do ask in the name of your Son, the one who died for us on the cross, the one who brought to us these emblems of bread and cup. Loving God, bless these emblems, the nourishment of our bodies and our spirits as we prepare to receive them now. It is in Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.